If you're watching this right now and you haven't hit the like button, Billy, get on it. Bug your brother. Tell him to do the same.
We are very excited to be joined by today's guest, a one-stop shop for everything Buffalo Bisons, writer and analyst for the Herd Chronicle, Brian Frank. Welcome to the Walk-Off, my man. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I know it took a little while to coordinate the schedules, but we're glad to have you on the show and be able to talk some baseball with you. I read your stuff all the way on Herd Chronicle, by the way, man. Love your work. I read just a few weeks ago the interview you had with the Blue Jays' most recent call-up, Ernie Clement. Great interview, very informing, very entertaining. And to anyone who wants to know more on Ernie, you have to check that out on the Herd Chronicle. Great work, Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, Ernie had a lot of cool stuff to talk about because he's kind of a local kid here. He grew up in Rochester, New York, which is just maybe about an hour away from Buffalo, a little more than that. And he grew up a Bills and Sabres fan. So, yeah, he was great to talk with. And he's had a tremendous year for Buffalo before getting called up. So,
well, we were actually going to talk Ernie Clement a little later in the interview, but let's get into it here. Talking about him right off the top here. Newest member and call-up of the Toronto Blue Jays. You have a good idea of what type of kid he is. Like you just said, local boy. What can folks expect from him on the field? As you said, he was performing well with the Bisons before that call-up.
He was an absolute hitting machine before he got called up. 921 OPS. And the thing that really jumps out to me about him, though, is there's sort of this intangible thing that you see in guys sometimes, and he just looks like a major leaguer. Like just the way he carries himself on the field, the confidence that he had. And his first game up with Toronto, I tuned in on TV, his first start, and I was watching. I was nervous. I just interviewed him a few days before, and he's a Buffalo guy, So I'm watching, I'm nervous. And they showed him out at second base, and he was just kind of walking around like he always take carrying himself. And I was like, I think I'm more nervous than he is right now. Like, he just, there's something about him. Like he's just got that major league character about him, and you can just kind of see it the way he carries himself.
Isn't it cool to watch guys that you watch in that AAA team and that you've talked to and stuff like that get the call up? Like I know Adam and I have been lucky enough to have some of these guys on. We call it the walk-off bump, right? When we get a chance to talk to them before they get called up. Yeah, I almost feel like a parent almost. Like I'm so excited and like you said, nervous for them.
Well, that's weird because I always thought it was the Herd Chronicles bump. So,
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely get nervous when they get called up and finally get a chance, or guy pinch hits or gets in the game as a starter. I absolutely get nervous when they're up there, but it is exciting to see. And, the kind of the Buffalo Toronto shuttle that they have now, that guys go up and come down quite often. So yeah, it's definitely exciting.
So obviously, Brian, we're going to get into all sorts of Buffalo Bison talk, but let's start with the big club here. Whenever a team's slumping, there's always a lot of outside noise that starts to kind of seep into the clubhouse. The fans become negative and restless, and Lord knows that's where we're at right now. The players play tight. We've seen plenty of examples of this over the last 2 weeks. It's not fun. And I'm curious your thoughts on this team. Is this Blue Jays big league club closer to the squad we watched in April? Are we more seeing what they are, or is there some sort of in between? And in your opinion, what needs to happen for this team to right the ship?
I was talking to someone about this the other day, and it's hard to put your finger on one thing that's kind of wrong right now. Other than the division is so good, and they've had such a tough schedule. Like I saw something maybe about a week ago that they were tied for the toughest schedule so far in Major League Baseball that they'd already played by the record of their opponents. But then going forward from now to the end of the season, it's still the 5th toughest schedule. So it's not going to get any easier. And a lot of it has to do with the division that you're in. Even though they're playing less games against those teams, you're still playing those teams that are all above 500. So I think a lot of it just has to do with the division that they're in. That being said, they're not playing up to where they should be right now. I think they're probably closer to that April team or somewhere in between the two. But it's really hard to put your finger on one thing because they're not hitting with guys in scoring position is a big
Oh,
problem.
are they ever not? Yeah.
But how do you fix that? It's almost a case of maybe guys are trying a little bit too hard, like, you tighten up a little bit with the guys in scoring position because you're trying to do something good and carry the team. I think it's almost, they just kind of have to have that one or two breakout games where they score a lot of runs and everybody can just kind of relax and go with it. I think you just kind of have to get lucky and have one of those games, and then everything will be all right again.
Brian, do you believe in clutch? I know there is this idea in sports that sometimes and I bring this up because of runners in scoring position. Mm-hmm. There's this idea in sports that sometimes clutch doesn't really exist, and that a big enough sample size, you'll just see that a player either is hot at the right time or the wrong time. Do you believe in clutch?
Yeah, no, I do believe in clutch. I think there are guys that just kind of bear down in those. I remember growing up, George Bell was a guy who I looked at as being clutch.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's a guy on third base, he's bringing him in. Whether it's a sack fly or base hit or whatever, like he's getting them home, and yes, I definitely think there are guys who bear down in those situations and get the run in. Yeah. Right now, I think it's just kind of like I said, guys just trying too hard, and it'll work itself out in the end through the ups and downs of the baseball season, hopefully.
It's funny how difficult times like this are on fans, and I can't even begin to wrap my head around what the guys in the clubhouse are actually going through, right? Like, we as fans, it's so easy to be like, this is hard on us. Like, if only they would just get it together. But like, there is a real monkey on their back right now.
And I think a lot of that as fans is magnified a lot by Twitter, because you're constantly reading people talking about it and analyzing it and saying what's wrong with them. And so it maybe sometimes seems worse than it did, say 10, 15 years ago, when you weren't seeing that constant, talking about why they're not hitting or why they're not doing that. So I think it does get magnified with Twitter. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because the losing streak, it used to be so much more individual, right? Like, you would just need to like deal with it. Oh no, my favorite team is slumping. You talk about it with a few of your buddies and you bitch and complain. But now you're right. There really is, like, it almost creates a scenario where things are magnified to an extent that maybe they shouldn't be, right? Like, all the negativity feeds into each other, and like the panic breeds panic. Yeah.
And I suppose it probably works the opposite way too when things are going well. Maybe it seems like they're going a little too well because you're constantly reading and talking about it,
Well, it's that old baseball adage, right? Is a player's never as good as they're playing or as bad as they're playing. So
exactly.
Okay, Brian, let's do it, eh? Let's get into this AAA team, the Buffalo Bison. And before we get into individual players and prospects and stuff like that, which we are going to, tell us about this year's team. Is this a competitive AAA team? And what are your thoughts on them so far?
Yeah, the story of the season has kind of been, looking at the lineup before the season started, I thought, like, man, this is a really good AAA lineup. It really is. A lot of the guys have been there before last year, at least for part of the year, and performed. And they got off to a really bad start in April. They weren't hitting at all. The worst kind of day probably where it all kind of, you can put your finger on, they played a doubleheader against the Iowa Cubs. And in AAA, in minor league baseball, when you play a doubleheader, they're 7-inning games. And in both 7-inning games, they were being no hit going into the 7th inning.
Holy crap.
And that was kind of the low point. That was on April 20th. About a week later, the end of April 28th, about, things just completely turned around. Their first 23 games, they were averaging 3.54 runs per game. Since that time, April 28th, they're averaging 7.28 runs per game. Now,
holy shit, Brian! They doubled that.
They just, and it's lineup wide. It's completely through the lineup that everybody just started hitting it. It's kind of like what it's contagious before. Right? Yeah, it's just something's just gotta break out, and hitting's contagious. But to kind of put that number in perspective, 7.28 runs per game Charlotte currently leads the International League at 6.37. The Texas Rangers lead Major League Baseball at 6.33. And the Blue Jays right now are at 4.76. But the Bisons since April 28th, 7.28 runs per game. So the offensive reawakening, the guys who are hitting well have hit even better, like Horwitz and Lantigua and Ernie Clement before he left. And guys who are struggling have just completely broken out and gotten hot, like guys like Davis Schneider, Tanner Morris. And so it's really been exciting to see.
Okay, so let's get into some of these guys, because I know you just mentioned a bunch of dudes on my list here, and there has been some knocks on this Blue Jays farm system lately because of the lack of high-end prospects, right, Brian? There isn't that guy that broke into the top 100 of Baseball America's top prospects, and so
Right.
you feel a little jilted as a Blue Jays fan. But there really are some guys on this Bison squad that can contribute to the Jays team this season. In your opinion, who are those guys Jays fans should be keeping an eye on? Who can you see as the next call up?
Yeah, looking at it from a hitting perspective, if you're gonna kind of say who was the Bison's MVP at this point in the season, I think you could make a really good case for three different guys. One is Ernie Clement, who has already gone up to Toronto, and then Spencer Horwitz, who's an absolute on-base machine, and he's on the Blue Jays 40 man. So, it's not that far-fetched to think that he could be called up, but he's currently hitting 325, 447 on-base percentage, 34 walks in 43 games. He just gets on base. Yeah, he just gets on. Left-handed hitter too, which I know the Blue Jays like from their off-season acquisitions. You can kind of see that. And then the other guy who's just.
But let's hold on one second.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Horwitz for a second. Now, I know that the knock on Horwitz is maybe the fact that he is primarily a first baseman, which of course, when you've got Brandon Belt and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in your lineup, it does block them. Now, that said, they did just see Kevin Kiermaier. It's been unofficial yet. He's not on the IL, but he definitely did tweak his back. Left-handed hitter in the outfield. We've also watched Spencer Horwitz take 3 in a row games in left field. What is his defense like in left? Is it big league ready? And can you see Spencer Horwitz being used as that fourth outfielder for the Blue Jays?
Yeah, I absolutely could. He's natural first baseman, so I think outfield is kind of something that he's worked in the last couple of years. But he looks comfortable out there. Like, he's not going to be obviously a Kevin Kiermaier or Dalton Varsho, but he's not gonna embarrass you out there either. He's going to play, a solid left field was probably where he would be, and he absolutely looks comfortable out there. And like I said, Ernie Clement's another guy too who can play the outfield as well. So you got both those guys who could fill in probably in left field with like Varsho in center and Springer in right. So absolutely, both those guys could be guys who filled in that way.
I know that Spencer Horwitz joined us last season on the show here, and he's kind of at a point in his minor league career where mentally he's probably ready for the next jump, right? How old is he, Brian? 25?
Yeah, he's 25 years old, and he looked good in Buffalo. He came to Buffalo last year. I don't know, maybe it was like about July-ish.
Yeah.
And looked really good from the time he arrived here, and has really kind of taken his game to another level this year, hitting for a higher average, and really takes pride in his ability to get on base, to not strike out a lot, to, take walks when they're there. So, yeah, if you want a guy who's going to come up to the major leagues and really grind out at bats and not, chase bad pitches and take the walks when they're there and get on base, then he's the kind of guy you're looking for. Absolutely.
Now, as for Horwitz, for those out there who haven't seen him before, probably limit your expectations on power.
Yeah, he's only got 2 home runs so far. Power's something I could see coming with him down the road, but right now, he's not really a power hitter, more of like a line drive. Like I said, grinding out those at bats kind of hitter.
Now, before we move on, and of course, we've got a list of names to get to here.
Yep.
Would you, if you were a betting man, would you say Spencer Horwitz is the most likely to be the next call up?
I would say
Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball here,
Yeah.
Brian, so you're allowed to be wrong on this one.
I would think it's probably between him and Otto Lopez. Just because Otto's been up, before and kind of has a little bit of major league experience already, even though he hasn't played a lot when he's been up there. He does have that experience. So I would think probably between those two guys.
Perfect. Let's get on. You brought up, let's talk Rafael Lantigua, because he is a dude that hasn't been on many folks' radar, but is making some noise in Buffalo right now.
He's been so impressive since he got here last season. Last year I looked
For
at
the
him.
ignorant out there, where did he come from? Fill us in on his positional versatility, and we can go from there.
Yep. Yeah, he's from the Dominican and a natural infielder, kind of a shortstop, third baseman, second baseman. He kind of defensively reminds me of Santiago Espinal, honestly, when he was here in Buffalo a few years ago. He just looks so comfortable at all those positions, no matter where they play him at third, and he looks like a natural third baseman, like diving for balls and stuff. And they put him at short, he looks like a natural shortstop. He's just so comfortable. And then he does play in the outfield as well.
Really?
Yeah, he'll play a little left field as well. They really try to make guys as versatile as they possibly can here. So, but he's not on the 40-man yet, so that's why I didn't mention him as a guy being called up. But
he was an
so
international
hot.
free agent when they brought him in, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And he just looks so comfortable defensively. And last year, kind of the same thing as Horwitz, like a guy who'll grind out at bats, really look good. And this year he's just taken his game to another level. Right now is
how old is Lantigua? And sorry to keep interrupting you here.
No problem. He's 25 years old, so still a young guy with the best is yet to come for him. But yeah, 1.005 OPS right now.
Wow.
And he stole home the other night in Lehigh Valley, like a straight steal of home. Wow. Takes his walks when they're there, 38 walks so far in 41 games. And just really, like I said, if you were gonna name a Bison MVP right now, you'd have to Horwitz, Clement, and Lantigua. I don't know which one of the three you would pick, because they've all hit so well this season. It's really unbelievable. But yeah, Lantigua's been really impressive.
So I know, speaking of guys not on the 40-man, and he's another friend of the show, but one thing that has impressed me this year is his power is surpassing anything I thought he had within him. Tell me about Davis Schneider.
He got off to such a bad start, and I talked to him a few weeks ago, and he just openly says, like, yeah, I'm a slow starter. Like seems like every year I get off to a slow start. And he has just caught fire since that April 28th date I was talking about. He's leading the team with 11 home runs. 10 of them have come since April 28th.
Wow.
Yeah. So
okay, that's insane.
He's really on fire right now. Since April 28th, his OPS 1.095. And just has overcome that slow start that he had, and is just really on fire, hitting home runs left and right. And yeah, he's looked really good.
And this is another dude that could fit into multiple positions, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty much the whole team. They like, I think Casey Candell really believes in having guys ready for if an opportunity arises in the major leagues. They're ready for anything. You need a guy to fill in left field, you can plug in these guys there if you need to, and they're all, he's familiar with playing all over the infield as well. So absolutely, he's got that versatility too.
So I know that Schneider plays a good second base and a good third and right and left. Tell me, I also saw that he does take some reps here and there at shortstop. What is he like at shortstop? Obviously not his strongest position.
Yeah, he's usually, most of the time he's at second or third, but he looks comfortable there. Like he doesn't look out of place or anything like that. Yeah, he looks comfortable. He's a grinder, you know. He just
I bring that up. I bring that up not because I'm like, oh, obviously Bo Bichette can be knocked off short, but with Santiago Espinal as really the only viable option on the big league team as a backup shortstop, it does intrigue me to see a guy like Davis who is versatile and can take some in an emergency scenario reps at shortstop. Love hearing that he's proficient there. Anyways.
I absolutely agree with that, and Ernie Clement now too is up there in the
Yes.
too, so
Yes.
yeah, so he can play shortstop, and I think maybe that's where like Otto Lopez kind of gets another little advantage on who your next major league call-up could be, because he plays short.
He does play a good short, yeah.
Okay, I want to jump in here with a question from the audience here. Kind of ties into, you guys were touching on the 40-man roster. So this one comes from Tyler on Patreon. Says, hey guys, I'm new to Canada and new to baseball. Can you explain the 40-man roster? Is it even possible for a player to be called up to the Jays midseason who isn't on the 40-man roster? How complicated would that be? And then, Brian, tell me your thoughts on Cam Eden. 20 stolen bases versus 1 caught stealing. That would be fun to watch on the big club.
Yeah, so the 40-man roster is kind of a complicated thing, but it's usually not that hard to clear room for a guy like Ernie Clement wasn't on the 40-man last week, and they put someone on the 60-day disabled list. Oh, it was
yes,
Mitch, right? Mitch White went
Mitch
on the
White, yeah,
60-day disabled list, which clears up room on the 40-man. So it is can be complicated with all the little rules around it and stuff, but it's usually not that hard to clear room if you need to get a guy onto it. Whether it's taking somebody off it, in which case they have to clear waivers, but you can get people onto it. As far as Cameron Eden,
and let's before you jump into Eden, let's clarify here too. So no, you can't get called up if you're not on the 40-man roster. And like Brian was just saying,
right,
what would then have to happen is the team needs to somehow massage that guy onto the 40-man roster before he can be called up. So in this scenario with Ernie Clement, Mitch White was then put on the 60-day IL, which means that his name comes, if you're on the 60-day IL, your name comes off the 40-man roster.
Right. And a lot of times what they'll try to do, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, is they'll take a guy who's struggling right now, maybe like a pitcher or something who hasn't pitched well this year, and they
slide him through waivers.
Sometimes that works and he gets through, and sometimes another team will pick him up and you lose a guy maybe unnecessarily sometimes. So yeah, it can be a tricky thing. But getting to Cameron Eden, he has been very impressive. And you I think you touched on the biggest thing with him is he's 20 for 21 stealing bases, which is just phenomenal. And he's really been impressive this season. Like you want to talk about guys who look comfortable in the outfield. He's usually in center field and he looks very, very good there. Very comfortable playing center field, kind of has those big long strides. I don't want to compare him to Devon White because you don't compare anybody to Devon White, but the big strides that he takes when he's running does kind of remind me of Devo when he played center field. But yeah, he's done well. He's hit well. He's played good defense, and he's been very impressive so far.
How old is Cam Eden?
Eden is 25 years old. He went
also
to
25.
Went to UC Berkeley. Yeah, he was actually a shortstop in college originally. And,
really?
And switched to the outfield, I think, his junior year of college. Yeah, so. But
it's kind of funny, Brian, how many times that's the story. Oh yeah, he played shortstop his entire college career.
but that just seems like such a big switch to me, Like, I mean, just playing like high school baseball, like I was an infielder, like switching to the outfield would have been like,
yeah. What are you,
guys
Jazz Chisholm?
Yeah. Yeah, these guys are just doing it like AAA, like, oh yeah, I started playing outfield this year, and it just seems so easy for them and such an easy change. Yeah.
So obviously, great speed with Cam Eden. Knows what he's doing on the base path. You defensively good, above average. What is he?
I would say above average. Yeah, he's above average. He looks really good out there. Really good in center field, and very comfortable. And I think he's. I don't know if he's played left or right this year in Buffalo. He's almost always in center, but I'm sure he could fill in left and or right if need be. Absolutely.
Now, I do want to talk Nate Pearson with you, but before we do that, did you have anyone else that we should highlight? Should Blue Jays fans be aware of in Buffalo that could possibly be a contributor to this Jays club at some point in 2023?
I don't know. A guy who's just kind of interesting is Tanner Morris. When he came up last year to Buffalo from AA, he'd hit well in New Hampshire, and I kind of had high expectations for him. And he didn't hit that well at AAA, but he was suffering from a hand injury even when he was playing. Then eventually they put him on the injured list. He came in this year, and again, left-handed batter that's versatile, can play all over the place. He came in this year and really similar to Davis Schneider. He got off to a really bad start and then all of a sudden just broke out. And so he's just kind of an interesting guy. I don't know, in the pecking order, there might be other guys ahead of him for this year, but he's kind of a guy to just kind of keep your eye on for the future because he's hitting really well right now.
Great intels, man. Like, honestly, we really appreciate you sharing all your knowledge on these Buffalo Bisons, because we try and keep tabs on these AAA guys and with everyone within the affiliate league, but we don't follow them game to game. So it's nice to have someone with the insight you have. So appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay, Nate Pearson, Big Nate, finally is healthy and on the field. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this offseason, is that Nate Pearson healthy and ready to go. He started the year in Buffalo and so far has been absolutely excellent out of the Jays pen. What did you like about what you saw from his time with the Bisons? And are you, Brian, a Pearson believer?
I am a Pearson believer. And the biggest thing with him, and this isn't going to come as a surprise to anybody, but is just health. He's finally healthy, and he's had so many almost like fluky injuries over the years.
He lost the year to mono. Come on.
Yeah, I know. It's just these crazy things. And this year he came in and was healthy and, had some good outings in Buffalo and throwing strikes and just got his confidence. And I was so happy to see him when he got up to Toronto, have some good outings and be able to keep. I was afraid, if he got up there and had a bad outing or something, they'd send him back down and the yo-yoing would kind of start again. But like, he got up there, had good outings, got confidence in the major leagues. And, it seems like the sky's the limit now, maybe even being like Romano's setup man. So that he's really been impressive this year, right from the get-go here in Buffalo. Yeah.
His off-speed stuff has been also impressive, hasn't it? Everyone knows about his big triple-digit fastball, but he has really improved when it comes to his secondary pitches, hasn't he?
Yeah, and that's a big thing, because even though he throws so hard, can throw 100 or 101, whatever, you got to have those secondary pitches and got to be able to throw them for strikes. And he seems, like I said, health and confidence, I think, are the biggest things for him, and both are going in the right direction this year.
Bullpen is always a question mark with this Toronto Blue Jays club, or at least it has been the last couple of years. So it's easy as fans to start panicking about the bullpen when things aren't going exactly the way you'd like them to. Is there anyone else in this Buffalo Bison bullpen you think could wind up contributing to this Jays bullpen before the season end? And are there any off the radar arms that have caught your eye this season? Maybe not contributing this year, but just guys we should keep an eye on.
Yeah, the guy who kind of jumps out to me, and he's coming off an injury, so he hasn't pitched that much, but Kyle Johnston, who looked
friend
really
of the
good
show,
years ago.
And
last year he kind of had a rough season, but this year he's only pitched in 6 games so far, but has a 1.13 ERA. And his stuff has looked really good, just from watching it with a fan's perspective. His fastball is really moving, and yeah, he's looked really good so far. So I think he's a guy that you can keep an eye on. Another guy who people probably recognize the name, who's pitched well, is Paul Fry, who used to be on the Baltimore Orioles. He's got quite a bit of major league experience. Left-handed pitcher. He's been looking really well too. And even Casey Candel's even kind of used him to close out some games. He uses different guys in the closer role, but he has 4 saves so far, so he's kind of mixing them into that spot. He's got a 2.96 ERA so far, so he's been really solid. And then the other guy who kind of comes to mind that you wouldn't know it from looking at his statistics is Hayden Yinger. He's pitched well. And he had an ERA around like 3. And then he had a couple of really bad outings, and he gave up like 5 runs in 2/3 of an inning or something like that. And then the next game he gave up a couple runs, and so his ERA kind of ballooned up. And now he's kind of.
Isn't it funny how quick an ERA can just look awful,
especially
for a good reliever?
Yeah. Especially those bullpen guys that like only pitch maybe 1 or an inning in 2/3 or something. Like if you have a game where you give up like 5 or 6 runs in an inning, like your ERA is done, like so his ERA ballooned up, but then he's had some good outings since then. He's kind of figured out whatever the problem was and looks good again. So and he's got a lot of strikeouts, 37 strikeouts in like 26 innings. So he's definitely a guy that people probably had their eye on. That don't be deceived by the high ERA.
By the numbers.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when you're talking numbers, it always reminds me of, and I don't know if you remember Mark Zepchinski back. Yeah. So he actually joined us on the show last year as he was trying to make a comeback to the big leagues. And one of the things that he really touched on was his splits, right? And how he kind of got relegated as that lefty specialist, even though in the beginning of his career, he actually pitched very well against both righties and lefties. In fact, if you even look, he's got that World Series ring from the 2011 Cardinals, and he pitched in the World Series, and they were not just lefties. It was very impressive to see what he was doing. And then what happened is when the lefty specialist became more and more prevalent in the big leagues, he pitched to righties less and less. Mm-hmm. And what happened is when he would get an opportunity to pitch against a righty and give up a hit, he might not see another righty for a month. And then his numbers just, your baseball's so analytically driven these days. You look at that. Oh, what's his batting average against righties? Oh, it's god awful. And he's like, you just kind of get relegated to that specialist once you get tagged as that, because it's impossible to almost make back the ground you lose when you have a bad outing. Yeah.
Yeah. I always wonder too, talking about that kind of thing, like how many of, and I'm sure it's a mixture, but how much of the, like what they look in to call up a guy is kind of like information that like the casual fan might not look at it so much. Like it might be like spin rate or hard hit balls off the guy and things like that, as opposed to actually like looking at ERA or but, I mean, that stuff would translate into like ERA and strikeouts and things like that, but maybe they're looking at kind of more like deeply at those numbers than like we would, as a thing.
So this is something that I don't know why, but I love Sahlen Field. I've never been there. I've driven by it. It looks so cool. There's something about it. Really curious what the fan experience is like at Sahlen Field. And I know that the Blue Jays called it home for a few months in 2021, and they did some major renovations. Are the Bisons and the fans still reaping the benefit of those renos? What is the atmosphere like at Sahlen Field?
Yeah, it's a tremendous atmosphere. I was talking with it, just this makes me think of, I was talking with Ryan Barucki about a month ago, because he came in with the Iowa Cubs, and he was saying that when Iowa's bus was pulling up to Sahlen Field, the Iowa players were saying, this is like a major league field. Because it was originally built to be a major league. They were originally seated 19,500 fans, but it was when Buffalo was making a push for an expansion team in the late 80s, early 90s. And it was built to be expanded to be about 40,000 fans. They could add an upper deck on the top and kind of stretch the seats around in the right field. So it very much, when you go to other minor league parks and then you come back to Buffalo, it does have kind of like a AAA plus feel, because it's kind of in between a AAA ballpark and a major league ballpark, you know. But people coming down from Toronto always comment about how close you can be to the field, how inexpensive the whole experience is, and you can get close to the players and get autographs or get balls thrown to you by the players and those types of things. So yeah, it is kind of has a minor league feel, but at the same time kind of has that almost like a major league type thing compared to other AAA ballparks.
I love this, Brian, this history lesson here. Can you give us a little bit more on that when it comes to Bisons baseball? Because I know most Blue Jays fans, only myself included, are only aware of Buffalo since 2013 when they became the affiliate with the Toronto Blue Jays. Give us a little bit more on that if you can.
Yeah, so Buffalo baseball history goes back, professional baseball history goes back to 1877 when the Bisons first started. And
wow.
Yeah, so they started in August of 1877, and then within a year and a half, by 1879, they were actually in the National League, the early National League. And we're in the National League from 1879 to 1885. Since then, they've pretty much been a minor league city. They have had a couple times when they were 1890, they had a Players League team, which was a major league, and 1914 and 1915. They had a Federal League team, which was a major league team, but and they were in the American Association for a brief time, the AAA American Association during the 80s and 90s, and Eastern League for a brief period, but they've mostly been an international league city, and have tried at a couple different occasions to lure a major league team here. Most notably that when Sahlen Field was built back in the late 80s. So it's kind of ironic that Major League Baseball eventually did come here and came to Sahlen Field with the Blue Jays coming here in 2020 and 2021.
Very, very cool. I love that so much. And honestly, like I said off the top, I really do love what you do with the Herd Chronicle. Give us a little background there. What started the Herd Chronicle, and is this your baby, or is this something that you got involved with later? Let me fill us in on what that's all about.
Yeah, it's really evolved over time. Like I started it back in 2015, I believe it was, and it kind of started as a purely Buffalo baseball history website. And I would write articles about old games, old players, and Buffalo baseball history. And over time, it just evolved into so much more, to the Twitter feed. And now I have an Instagram feed. But most notably, especially to Canadian baseball fans and Blue Jays fans, as I've started covering the team much more. I do something called Conversations with the Herd, where I interview a Bisons player. I try to do one every week, at least during the season, where I interview a Bisons player about their road to AAA or their experience, major league experience they might have, whatever. And so it's really become kind of covering the team on a daily basis, which it wasn't at the start, but has certainly become that. So yeah, it's been a really cool, and I'm really glad I did it, and humbled at how successful it's become.
It honestly is excellent, man, and you do a very, very good job of it. We're very grateful as Jays fans up north who wouldn't be able to follow it like we can because of the work that you put in. So thank you very much. I know that Adam has, I know he's jumped in a couple times here with
one
but
more
there is one
question to get to if we got time.
So before we do that, do you have a favorite Buffalo Bisons player, current and all time?
Oh boy, all time, like looking at all time, I when I first started this, interested in like Buffalo baseball history, I was really fascinated with those early National League days when the Bisons were in the National League. And they had a pitcher, Jim Galvin, whose nickname Pud, because he made the batters look like pudding when he was pitching, who's just like a fascinating kind of figure. He was the first major league pitcher to win 300 games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's still second all time in innings pitched and complete games, I believe, to Cy Young. And yeah, so when you look at those National League days, and the Bisons had 5 Hall of Famers on their team, 4 of them who were in the prime, who were in their prime at the time. And so those teams kind of fascinate me. When you get to more modern day, I've just been able to talk to so many different players now with
Yeah.
the Chronicles and what I do, that it's kind of hard to pick a favorite, because they're just all so nice and so supportive of what I'm doing. And so yeah, so I guess that would be my answer, that I can't pick one right now.
No, and I love
great
that,
answer.
Brian. Honestly, the fact you're giving voices to some of these minor league guys who wouldn't normally get to tell their story is very, very cool. So again, great job. For everyone who wants to follow along closer with the Buffalo Bison, Brian Frank writes and is an analyst with the Herd Chronicle. Follow along there. I'm going to toss to Adam here for this final listener question. Again, thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.
Okay, so from our Patreon, Jennifer says, lots of hype on Addison Barger this spring. He had a superhuman 2022 across all 3 levels, but let's be honest, 2023 has been pedestrian at best. Before last season's breakout, he had a minor league career batting average of 232. He's now hitting 237. Was Barger's season in 2022 a one-off?
No, I don't think so. He came up to Buffalo last year at the end of this season and just had like it was only for like 10 games, I think, but it looked really good. And then of course had a great spring training with Toronto this year. He's, like I said, the whole team kind of got off to a bad start this year. Barger included wasn't hitting for that high of an average, only hitting 237. But then he got injured and hurt his right elbow, his throwing elbow, which obviously is not good if you're shortstop and third baseman. And hasn't come back yet from that. So he hasn't played since April 20th, I think, about in that time. And
Davis Schneider has showed what you can do from April 20th on.
Exactly. Like I said, everybody kind of caught fire at that point. And he was really he got hurt on the road, but the last homestand that they were here and he was playing, you could tell that he was about ready to snap out of it. Like he hit some scorchers. He hit this line drive at the second baseman that the second baseman caught and like fell down, like it was hit so hard. He fell down when he caught it. So you could, at that time I was thinking, oh, he's snapping out of it. He's going to get hot this week. And then he got hurt. So I don't think he's going to be out that much longer. I talked to Casey Candell about him a couple weeks ago, and it didn't sound like, he didn't say he's going to be back soon, but it didn't sound like it was going to be like a long-term thing. So hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later, and get back on the hitting ways that he was having last year.
Okay,
amazing.
So don't give up on the hype.
No,
That's
don't give up on it. Yeah, he hasn't since the whole team and the whole offense got hot. He hasn't played, so when he comes back, hopefully he'll jump on that ship.
And he's still 23, right? He's got time. He's
a young guy. That's the other thing with Otto Lopez. Otto Lopez is only 24 years old. You think of him as being much older because he's been good here in Buffalo for a while, but he's only 24 years old. And yeah, Barger's only 23. So yeah, they're both still young and long season ahead.
Again, Brian, thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate you stopping by and talking baseball with us. And hopefully we can twist your arm and have you back here sooner than later.
Absolutely. Anytime. I love your show and it's an honor to come on. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you.